We have lots to discuss here in today's video, including some trade talk around a few teams, including the Montreal Canadiens, Edmonton Oilers, and the Florida Panthers. Plus, we have an updated story on the potential sale of the Pittsburgh Penguins. There was a story back a number of weeks ago that a former group of the owners, including Muriel Lemieux, were looking to buy the Penguins. We have a major update on that story. Plus, we have some signings, including a rumor around Byram possibly coming to terms sooner than later with the Buffalo Sabres. We also have some updates on the NHL schedule and what's going to be on the schedule for opening night. And the Oilers have announced a whole new set of coaches to work with head coach Chris Knoblauch. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here in today's video. We'll kick the video off here with some news around the Edmonton Oilers. We knew that they were going to be going through a bunch of interviews, and we're going to be seeing pretty extensive changes to the Oilers coaching staff, mainly because they wanted to make changes for one, and secondly, they were going to be losing some people like Glenn Gulletson, of course, who took the head coaching job in Dallas and then took the skills coach Peltier with him, and then we knew Paul Coffey, as much as he did a good job as their D coach, really when he signed up for that, didn't really have the intention of staying on the bench for too long a period of time that he was likely wanting to return to his previous role. So we knew there was going to be a fair bit of change. So they've finally gone through the full process here, and they've announced their new coaching staff. Now, they are extending Mark Stewart. He's going to continue to work on the penalty kill and will also take over the D coaching. Of course, Stewart, the former NHL defenseman himself. Paul Coffey, as we said, will indeed come off the bench and return to his previous role, which was an advisory type role to the ownership. So that will go on. Former goalie coach Dustin Schwartz is not going to be returning, which we suspected. His contract was up, and he was not offered a new one or an extension. So he is gone from the Oilers organization. New to the organization is Paul McFarland, 39-year-old, will be named assistant coach. Most recently was the head coach for the Calgary Hitmen in the Western Hockey League. Had a pretty good run there. He also had a lot of NHL assistant coaching jobs in the past, including most recently with the Seattle Kraken, and of course spent time as well with the Florida Panthers and the Toronto Maple Leafs. So he's got a fair bit of experience around the NHL. Said it was recently a head coach and junior. Pretty well-respected guy with a good resume. McFarland will come in, and he will now be their power play coach and work with the forwards. So I think that's a pretty good hire there. They've hired Peter Aubrey as the new goaltending coach. Recently spent a couple of years working in the NCAA, and prior to that, spent 8 years in the Blackhawks organization, working with their goalies, mostly in the minor leagues, like the AHL goaltenders. They've also hired Connor Allen, who will be the new skills coach. Most recently worked with the USA under 17 team and in the USHL. So he'll take over for Peltier on the skills side of things. So to me, it seems like they get themselves a pretty good staff there. Got some pretty good hires, so I'd be curious to see how things kind of change moving forward. Obviously, Knoblauch's still the head coach, so I don't expect to see anything drastic change in their approach or their systems or what they how they want to approach the game. But I'd be curious to see with some new faces and new opinions on the bench if they'll go in any kind of different direction with anything. We'll have to see how things play out. We did get a little piece of the NHL schedule for the 25-26 season. We got word today from the NHL. They announced what's on the schedule for opening night, which is now confirmed to be October the 7th. That's a Tuesday. There will be a triple header, which will air both on the U.S., I believe, in, I think, TNT or ESPN, and then, of course, on Sportsnet in Canada. The opening game of the season will see the Florida Panthers at home raising their Stanley Cup banner against the Chicago Blackhawks, and at 5 o'clock Eastern time. That, to me, is kind of confusing, and no disrespect to Chicago, but why would they not go with more of a rival to the Panthers? Maybe one of the teams in the East that they played and defeated in the playoffs, the Leafs, the Hurricanes, the Lightning, any of those teams, or even another top team, just a better matchup. And why that time? I understand they're trying to stagger it so that one game can finish before the next one can start and so on. But to me, the timing of it is just kind of weird. Maybe a triple header wasn't the best thing for a Tuesday night. If I were me, I probably would have went with a double header. I don't know. It just seems like an odd choice to me. We'll see, I guess, how it goes. But yeah, the Panthers will raise their Stanley Cup banner on opening night. We're also going to see the New York Rangers at home against the Pittsburgh Penguins. So, of course, lots of history there, being in the same division in the Metro for a long time. And now we have an extra storyline at it with Mike Sullivan, the new head coach of the New York Rangers, the longtime former head coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins. So, obviously, that Sullivan storyline will be quite present there in that game. And then the final game of the night will feature the Los Angeles Kings at home against the Colorado Avalanche. Again, not a big deal, but nothing. I wouldn't call those two teams rivals. They're both pretty good teams in the West. The Avalanche have been stronger, won more playoff games and more series recently, have not too far from winning the Stanley Cup. But those two teams haven't really built up a rivalry amongst themselves per se. They haven't had a playoff series or anything like that. So again, I just would have thought you would want to kick off the new season with maybe a little bit more of a focus on rivalries. They have one rivalry game in there between the Rangers and Pittsburgh, and that's kind of it. I don't know. To me, it just kind of creates a thicker storyline to me if the Panthers are raising their Stanley Cup banner against one of the teams that they beat on their way to winning that. Especially the Panthers, they are kind of like the bad guys, the bad boys of the NHL. That's the way they play. That's the reputation they have. To me, I think they would love nothing more than to kind of rub it in against one of the teams that they beat. It's just how that team goes. Like, you need some villains in the world, and they do a good job of playing the villains in the NHL. And what better way than to have them start against one of their rivals? But to me, I think it's a missed opportunity by the NHL. But it's just a schedule, not a big deal. But I love to know what everybody else thinks. To me, it's just odd timing, odd team. The rest of the schedule will come out on Wednesday, July 16th, at 1 o'clock Eastern time. I do know that some media members have seen the full schedule, and a few of them have leaked a few of their games and dates. I know the Maple Leafs, I believe, are going to be opening up against the Montreal Canadiens. I believe that's the second night of the season on October the 8th. The Habs will be on the road, that seems to be a common thing. Montreal on the road against Toronto. I think last year it might have been the opposite, to be honest. But other than that, we don't know a whole lot, and we'll get the rest of the schedule on Wednesday. A bunch of signings today as well. The Winnipeg Jets came to terms with Morgan Barron, so that's a salary arbitration hearing that will not be required. They avoid arbitration, come to terms on a 2-year contract of $1.85 million. I think that's a good deal for both sides. Barron brings a pretty good mix of size, speed, and skill to the bottom six, and I think he's earned himself a bit of a raise and a good contract there. So again, I think I like that contract for both sides there. The Islanders made a couple signings today, including one of their first-round picks for the 2025 NHL draft, signing 16th overall pick Victor Eklund to his 3-year ELC. So he's all signed up, and they also signed Travis Mitchell, who's a 24-year-old RFA defenseman from the minor leagues, getting a 1-year, 2-way contract, $775 at the NHL, $100K in the American Hockey League with a guaranteed total payout of $125K. The San Jose Sharks have also signed RFA defenseman Jack Thompson. He gets the same, a 1-year, 2-way contract. And the Canes have also signed Skylar Brindamore, of course, Rod Brindamore's son, who will get to make his NHL debut and get in a few games late in last season. The 25-year-old restricted free agent signs a 1-year deal with a league minimum salary of $775 at the NHL level, $90K salary at the AHL level, with $100K total guaranteed money. A significant update on Bo Byram and the Buffalo Sabres. As I said off the top of this video, there was speculation that the Sabres and Byram were kind of closing in on potential contract and avoiding arbitration. That indeed has happened. Now that I've further into the video, the news is now official. So Bo Byram and the Buffalo Sabres agree on a 2-year contract, avoiding salary arbitration, average annual value $6.25 million. Now, this does a couple things. Not only does it get him under contract, so you know he's going to be playing next year, and you're not going to drag this on. Obviously, he was filed for arbitration, so it wouldn't have made it that far anyway. But you avoid a nasty arbitration hearing, and nobody really wants to go through that process if you can help it. This walks him right to unrestricted free agency. So clearly this tells me that the combination of the team or the player are still not certain on a long-term marriage between those two sides. So this does, like I said, it walks him to free agency. that if he ends up staying in Buffalo, that he will be able to choose his own team in his next contract at his own doing in the shortest period of time possible. This also gets, like I said, under contract at that kind of money at $625 because it's a short term, makes that pretty attractive for trade. So to me, I think this, he'd be eligible for an extension in a year. So I think this is a win-win for the player and the team. I still think that a trade is likely, and this makes it probably even more so because of the attractive contract that goes with them. So, we'll see what happens. Look at the Marty Necas situation in Carolina. Not too long ago, we thought for sure Necas was going to be traded. The team and the player waited to get a deal done. A trade, lots of conversations took place. They didn't find a deal that was kind of coming together and materializing to make the team happy to pull the trigger. They signed a 2-year deal, which walked him right to free agency, which is where he's heading towards now because this was last offseason. And then early in the season, boom, he's traded for Rantanen. And now the Avalanche have to decide, are they extending him for him to be a long-term member of that team, or is he going to try to move on again? We'll see. That'd be the same sort of scenario. So Byram can do that. So if they don't trade him this offseason, I would say that he'll be a prime target for any team that's looking for an offensive defenseman. Once we hit, like, say, the 20-game mark between there and, say, Christmas or January. So I still don't see him having a long-term future with the Sabres. But we'll see what happens. This makes him an attractive trade option. And if they don't find what they're looking for and Kevin Adams is picky and he sticks around long-term, then he gets to free agency as soon as he is able to. So it's a win-win on both sides. As I mentioned as well in the opener, we had a big update to the story around the Pittsburgh Penguins ownership. Back a number of weeks ago, there was a report from TSN and the Athletics' Pierre LeBrun indicating that his sources were telling him that the former ownership group of the Penguins, including Muriel Lemieux and his business partners, were looking to repurchase the Penguins. Now, obviously, there was lots of chatter around that time. Fenway Sports Group, who owned the Penguins, put out a statement eventually saying that all they were looking to do was to add a minority ownership partner, and that's all they were looking for at the time. Some people kind of, defied the rumors and said that there wasn't anything to it, and others said that, regardless if they're interested or not, all Fenway Group is really looking to do here is add a minority stakeholder. So, big update today on The Athletic from Josh Yowie. His report now says that he's been able to confirm with sources that all the reporting from LeBrun back 3-4 weeks ago was indeed true. There is confirmation from enough sources that he's saying that the Muriel Lemieux ownership group, who previously owned the Penguins, including Ron Burkle and David Morehouse, are indeed very interested in repurchasing the Penguins. Now, of course, the problem here is that it's been, 3, 4, 4 years, I think it's been since they sold. They sold for just under $1 billion. I think it was around $950, I think it was, that they sold the Penguins to Fenway Sports Group. Well, the value's gone up substantially. I mean, look at what we've seen. Seattle comes into the league with a $650 million expansion fee, and now we're talking about expansion again, and they're talking somewhere in the $2 billion range. I mean, that is just an explosion of team values. So, you made a good amount of money by selling the team off. If you look at what Mario and his partners paid for the Penguins originally compared to what they sold it for, they made a handsome profit. And they might have to bring in some more investors than they had before. I don't know. But I guess the hope here is that they can convince Fenway Sports Group to sell the team back to them. But to maybe not be looking for like a $2 billion price tag, looking for something a little bit more reasonable, based on the fact that the Penguins, you could say that they didn't have a great season last year. They're certainly a bottom 5, 6, 7 team in the NHL. They're probably going to finish lower next year than they did this past year. The ticket sales were okay still, but they were down. I think they were down to around 91% of their total tickets that were available, which is, by many standards, not great. So, you expect that to maybe even tumble a little bit further with the lower success rate, given the team's going deeper and deeper into a rebuild here every year. So they're kind of pushing that idea on the fact that maybe you should get out before this team goes any deeper and give us a bit of a deal. That's kind of that seems to be kind of the hope that they're looking for. Now I know Fenway Sports Group has denied the fact that they were pushing for a sale or looking for a sale and all that before, but I don't know. There's been some interesting choices made with some of their other holdings, so this makes me curious to see if this can be something that they pull off. But at least we know now that it's been confirmed by enough sources that the reports were true. Muriel Lemieux seems like he wants back in. Same thing was when he left the game as a player. Eventually he came back. Like he seems like he's always dragged back in because he just loves the game so much. So be curious to see if they can make it happen and regain ownership of that historic franchise that he was such a large part of. So we'll be monitoring that story here in the coming weeks and months to see if there's anything further in the works, we'll say. Some other trade talk we want to take a look at, some speculation around the NHL. A couple things. We want to look at a new article, another interview that Jeff Gorton did, this time with RG.org with Jimmy Murphy. We're going to take a look at a couple other comments around some other NHL insiders on a few other pieces of business, including the Panthers, Ducks, and Oilers, which we'll go to those first just because they're a little bit quicker here. And Jeff Barrick was on his program on the sheet, was talking with the Panthers. A lot of people believe right now that the Florida Panthers are in a predicament with their salary cap, that they have to make a trade to get themselves in cap compliance, you say. Well, I don't know that they're going to do that. And a lot of people assume it's going to be Evan Rodriguez. He doesn't think that's going to be the case. He doesn't think the Panthers want to move Rodriguez. He doesn't think Rodriguez wants to go anywhere, so they really, he likes being there. They really like having him, and they don't want to move him. And there's some people that still think that, we heard a lot of details about Matthew Tkachuk's health going through the playoffs. The fact that they haven't done anything yet to get themselves under the cap makes me think that they're probably going to start the year with him on LTIR. I mean, he had a pretty nasty injury. And sounds to me, we haven't confirmed this yet, but I wouldn't be shocked to find out later in the summer that he ends up having a significant surgery. And if that's the case, he could miss several months to start the year. I mean, that's just speculation on my part, but it wouldn't be shocking to find that out based on what we heard and what we know of what he was dealing with and going through. So as much as a lot of people think we're going to see a cost-cutting move from the Panthers and another team might be able to grab Rodriguez, I don't think it's going to happen, and at the very least they're going to push it as long as they can here until they probably have a better indication on Tkachuk. And if they can push this down, kick the can down the road, as they say, and get it into the season, and you better off, right? Why not keep them, start the year in LTIR if you need to, and then from there you don't know what else you're going to run into for injuries. Maybe by the time Tkachuk's ready to come back, maybe somebody else gets hurt, and then you're not really forced to trade anybody, and you can kind of see how long you can go without making a longer-term decision. So at this rate, a lot of people don't expect Rodriguez to move, but again, until we have a firmer, better idea on Tkachuk, it's probably hard to say. I know Elliot Friedman, as he's still kind of going through his long end-of-season podcast, talking with the Ducks, he mentioned a couple of names that we haven't really heard in the rumor mill before, and I don't think it's a case of the Ducks really looking to move these guys, but he did say that Pat Verbeek and the Ducks management team have been getting calls on some of their younger defensemen, including Pavel Mityukov and Olin Zellweger. I think the main reason for this is they have a lot of young talent. A lot of teams are looking at that, probably acknowledging that you can't keep them all. They're not all going to be able to grab full-time, long-term roster spots. Why not see if you can nab one of them out of the organization while they're still a young, controllable asset that can grow with your team instead? So far, Pat Verbeek has resisted the idea of moving them, but there's plenty of interest around the league in those players. And we'll say, we know they're not in a bad cap situation or anything like that. It would just be if he saw an opportunity to upgrade. And, of course, we all know with Anaheim, Mason McTavish is the big name that everybody's watching to see if they come to terms on a contract or if there's any more reports or updates on the concept that he was frustrated with them and how he views his future there to see if there's going to be any movement or not with him. With Edmonton, I know an update from Bob Stauffer saying that there's some goaltenders that are around the NHL that he feels the Oilers are probably keeping an eye on, and it might not be something we see. I mean, you never know. There could always be a trade, but it's probably unlikely until we get into training camp. There could be an opportunity with some of these goalies to even grab one on waivers so you don't have to give up any assets. We know the Oilers don't have a lot of cap space, and obviously bringing in much has to require something going out. So that might complicate things, but a couple of younger goalies that are going to have a tough path getting to the NHL would include Nico Daws in New Jersey and Michael DiPietro in Boston, who just re-signed. Now, I know with Boston, there's been a lot of speculation that Jonas Korpisalo's name has been out there, and I don't know that he has a long future there with the Bruins. We know last year at the end of season, he kind of complained about his playing time, whatnot. I don't know how thrilled he is to be, competing with Jeremy Swayman for games. I mean, Swayman is by far the better goaltender, and really moving forward is probably going to get a lot bigger chunk of the playing time. And really, Swayman didn't have a great season last year either. So if he bounces back and plays better, he's probably going to get even more, right? So I think long term, maybe the Bruins opt to try to move Korpisalo if they can and slide DiPietro in as the backup. I don't know. I mean, that's a possibility. Obviously, I was a little surprised when DiPietro re-signed, knowing that he kind of had a blocked path there, but maybe they're working on stuff. Because, I mean, there's been some questions around the future of Korpisalo, but we don't know on that front. And in New Jersey, of course, a lot of people expected that, especially before last year even started, that we'd probably see Nico Daws going to the NHL next year behind Jacob Markstrom. Of course, when they acquired Markstrom and then Jake Allen, the belief was that New Jersey, their young goalies were just taking on too much. They weren't quite ready for the roles they were given. Guys like Dawes and at the time Akira Speed were given time to go to the minors and just kind of, keep developing. It's not your time to be a full-time netminder. You're not ready to handle that yet. And clearly they decided that they liked Jake so much that they offered him a 5-year contract extension. So there's no path for the younger goalies in the Devils organization, especially Dawes, who would be the most ripe to make the jump for an opportunity. So it's a pretty good chance he could be claimed on waivers. So again, teams are aware of this, so they very well could become trade pieces so that they don't lose them for nothing. As I mentioned as well, the Montreal piece I want to take a look at. Another interview from Jeff Gorton, who's been busy talking to different media members here in the past week. This one with RG.org and Jimmy Murphy. Talked about a variety of things. They talked about the trade market, the number 2 center role, future of Mike Matheson, even a little bit about the Noah Dobson trade. When it comes to the number 2 center spot, he did confirm that the Habs are definitely still exploring the trade market for a number 2 center, but in the event that things don't materialize, that they are comfortable, was the word he used, with their internal options if they need to go that route. So whether that's giving Alex Newhook another shot at the number 2 center role, or hoping that a healthy Kirby Dach returning, after another season of missing significant time, could try to claim that spot. I honestly don't have a lot of faith in Dach as the number 2 center. I think he could still be a good player. If he can stay healthy, I still believe he could be effective, but I think he's going to end up more on the wing. Newhook's a good center. He's got great speed. I like aspects of his game. He's a smart player. I just don't know that he's got the offensive upside for a number 2. They have options there, right? And obviously with more young talent coming through the pipeline, you don't really want to block out too many players either. So it's, they seem comfortable if they need to go into the season without making that trade. And unless they can find a deal, of course, he's not saying that they're definitely doing it, but it makes sense. You got to remember a couple things here from Gorton. He's going to probably assume that a lot of other teams see this interview and read it or hear it, and they're going to be hearing what he's got to say. He's going to want to make sure that they're trading from a position of strength. So if he makes it other teams know that, we're interested, but we're quite comfortable with what we got. If we don't find something, it's okay. They don't want to come across as desperate by any means, right? So there's that. Secondly, you want to play up what you have for internal options in case you need to move one of those guys. They also talked about Mike Matheson, and obviously with the addressing all the rumors especially since the acquisition of Dobson, saying how Matheson's played big minutes for them in the last few years. He's such a good on and off the ice, such a big part of that team. Some of the criticism against it probably felt a little bit unfair considering he plays against the best players. He plays a lot of minutes. Yeah, will he make the odd mistake? Sure, that's natural in that kind of role. But, he does a lot for the team, plays in all situations, and they really like the player. So they haven't really made a decision, on his future, given the fact that he's entering the last year of his contract. So he wouldn't commit to extending him, and he certainly didn't commit to trading him, but just kind of really talked the player up and basically made it known that, they haven't really decided. But for right now, they really like what he brings to the team. So again, boosting his value, talking so positively about him, which is what I expect him to do. Not that he doesn't deserve it either, but, just typical GM talk in that sense. But I do think Matheson, if they are going to get themselves a number 2 center, to me, he's a prime player that other teams are going to probably, well, depending on the team, but he'd be a prime target between Matheson, maybe Doc, depending if they're willing to take a project back in that sense. Obviously Doc's got a player drafted with a ton of talent, but injuries have really derailed him for a few years. So, I'm not sure how much value he has, just because there is that, I'm sure, that skepticism or that risk factor, right? So we'll see. But obviously, Matheson for right now, it's difficult to say. He also talked about the Dobson trade and how Columbus offered more money, but Dobson chose Montreal. He wanted to go there, and they discussed a little bit in the interview about, is Montreal becoming a little bit more of a destination for players wanting to be there? At one point they were kind of considered one of the, premier teams in the league that everybody kind of wanted to play for. Things kind of changed a little bit. I mean, a lot of Canadian cities do sometimes struggle to attract a lot of top free agent talent and that kind of stuff. So, interesting to hear that, obviously it's becoming, which is good for the country, good for the players, especially for an original 6 team like Montreal to be such an attractive place for players to want to be. It's not just about taxes for everybody. It's not about everything. It's about, a chance to win on growing with a young, talented group of players. We've seen more of the Canadian cities that are, especially Montreal. You could throw Ottawa into that mix. Even Toronto hasn't. Obviously, Toronto's a different animal altogether, but they haven't had any issues. A lot of players want to go to Edmonton because of the success. It's not just about the taxes or the media pressure of playing in Canada. There's a lot more to it. Some people thrive with that stuff, right? They get an opportunity to play in a hockey-driven market. The fan bases might be a little crazy, but they love the sport so much, which is why. And then on top of that, a chance to win. And if they can be part of a team that brings a championship to a Canadian city, they understand just how big of a deal that is, and they thrive to want to be a part of it. So, interesting comments from Gorton. Again, I would make up that they certainly are exploring a number 2 center role. Obviously, no specific names were mentioned. He wouldn't do that because that would be tampering. So they are exploring that. But again, players like Matheson, Doc, I still think have questionable futures, but he did a good job talking them up, which is, if nothing else, trying to help their trade value, in my opinion. But we'll see what happens. Let me know your thoughts on all today's news and rumors in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.